Okay, let's dive in. We've got a really interesting snapshot here. It's from June 13th, 2025, based on a USA Today source.
Right.
And it paints quite a picture, doesn't it? Multiple things happening all at once.
It really does. Sort of a convergence of tensions, you could say.
So our mission for this deep dive is, well, to pull out the key threads from just this one day, according to this report, what was going on.
Yeah, what's fascinating is how you have these nationwide protests being planned,
Uh-huh.
a very specific, intense situation in Los Angeles,
Right. Yeah.
and then action from the Supreme Court all kind of humming in the background before this big event in D.C.
Exactly. Let's start with those protests. No King's Day, the source calls it. Planned across the country for that Friday, June 13th.
Yeah, and it mentions who's behind them, progressive groups. Names the ACLU, the Women's March.
The usual suspects, in terms of large progressive organizing.
Exactly, and also Bernie Sanders' network,
Yeah.
apparently organized in something like 2,000 cities.
Wow, that's widespread. But crucially, the source says not in D.C.
No, explicitly not in D.C.
And the purpose seems like a direct countermessage to that military parade planned for the next day.
That's how it's framed. A way to, promote a different kind of patriotism, grassroots patriotism, and push back against what they see as authoritarian symbolism.
Which sounds like their interpretation of the military parade itself.
Precisely. And the report does stress these are planned as peaceful demonstrations.
Okay, so that's the national picture. Then let's shift over to L.A. The source paints a pretty tense scene there on this same day.
Yeah, day 7 of protests focused on icy immigration and customs enforcement.
And the response sounds heavy. National Guard, Marines, ongoing curfews.
It does. But the big news from LA on this day, according to the report, is a legal ruling. A federal judge actually ruled the president's deployment of the Guard there illegal.
Illegal, wow. On what grounds?
Well, the ruling apparently said federal control had to go back to the state, back to Governor Newsom.
So, a check on federal power in what the judge saw as a state issue.
Seems like it. A real assertion of judicial limits on executive action in that context. And the report notes the administration is appealing that, naturally.
Okay, and sticking with the courts for a second, the Supreme Court was busy too?
Uh-huh. The source highlights one specific decision. They unanimously allowed a lawsuit to proceed. It was about a wrongful FBI raid on a family, the Martins.
Unanimously. That feels significant, even if it's just letting the case continue.
It does. The source sort of hints that this signals the court is willing to scrutinize federal actions, maybe potential overreach, keeping an eye on things.
It suggests the judicial branch is actively engaging with these croakers of federal power.
Exactly. And it also mentions the justices were scheduling non-argument days, with big rulings expected the following Monday. So, more to come.
So if you pull back on this one day, June 13th, you've got these planned nationwide protests.
This legal fight over Guard deployment in L.A.
And the Supreme Court signaling scrutiny of federal action.
Right, and it all feels like it's happening under the shadow of this event planned for Saturday.
The U.S. Army's 250th anniversary parade, which, the source notes, also happens to be the president's birthday, scheduled for June 14th.
And the link is explicit in the report. Those No King's Day protests are framed as a direct response to the parade.
It's clearly a focal point, and the source lays out the opposing views pretty clearly. Critics worried about militarism.
Versus supporters calling it patriotic.
Yeah, it really highlights those broader divisions, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This single day, June 13th, becomes a sort of microcosm. It's not just about the parade itself, but these deep disagreements over what patriotism looks like, the role of the military, the limits of authority.
So pulling it all together from this one source, this day shows a nation really grappling with itself. You see planned public dissent on a huge scale,
Right.
direct legal challenges to federal authority bubbling up from states and the courts.
All leading into a major national event. That itself is a symbol of these very different viewpoints.
It's a snapshot of that push and pull, between government branches and between the government and parts of the population.
Definitely not just a random collection of news items. They feel connected.
So the thought to leave you with is this. Seeing these things unfold together, the protests, the court actions, the anticipation around the parade, what does that make you think about how power, dissent, and national symbols are interacting in the U.S. at this moment, according to the snapshot?